From perks that let you create a literal clone of yourself to perks that let you take control of the entity, here are 15 of the coolest, most interesting, and most unique survivor perks in DBD history. Number 1, Wiretap. This has got to be one of my favorite perks in the entire game. After you repair generators for a total of 40%, you can activate this perk on any progress generator that you want, and it'll install a trap for 2 minutes. If the killer is ever within 14 meters of this trap generator, their aura is permanently revealed to all survivors while they're in that radius. This perk will then deactivate if the killer kicks the gen or if the timer runs out. What an incredibly interesting perk. That's like, it's just so much fun to use. Being able to create this 14-meter radius around the gen where any survivor can see the killer is so cool, and it provides some surprisingly useful information even if the killer is not in that area. For example, if you're in a 3-gen and you have one of the generators tapped, then every survivor on the team will know that the killer is not near that gen because they can see that the generator is trapped with wiretap because its aura will be yellow for them. Now, of course, the only downside to this perk is that the killer can kick it to immediately deactivate it, but I don't believe that the killer can tell that the generator is tapped. I don't believe that the little wiretap icon shows up from the killer's POV, but who knows, maybe I've never actually run into a survivor using this perk before. But if they are the type of killer to kick gens, then the next perk on our list would be perfect for this, and that is Blast Mine. I wanted to put these two together because they go well together in your perk build. Blast Mine has the same exact prerequisites as wiretap, where you have to repair gens for a total of 40% and then activate it on a partially progressed gen, and just like wiretap, it stays for a total of 2 minutes, but instead, this perk makes it so that if the killer kicks the trap generator, the gen will explode, stunning the killer for 4 seconds and blinding any player within 12.5 meters of the gen. So not only is this a super unique perk in general, especially because they have that extra detail where you can see the actual flashbang on top of the gen when you activate this perk, but it's also so cool that they made all of the numbers the exact same thing as wiretap. So if you have both of these perks on and you trap the generator, it applies both of these effects. So you either get wall hacks on the killer or you stun and blind the killer. It's a really fun combo, so I'd recommend trying it out. As I mentioned in the intro, there is one perk that lets you take control of the entity, and that is Repressed Alliance. Now, unfortunately, this perk is garbage, but I do think that it has the potential to be one of the coolest perks in the game, because it is already. It just has so much aura. I don't know how to describe it. Repressed Alliance makes it so that after you repair generators for a total of 45 seconds, you can press the active ability button while working on a gen to call the entity to block it for 30 seconds. You heard me right. There's literally a survivor perk that allows you to call the entity to block a gen for you, which obviously shouldn't be allowed because you're not the killer. Sadly, this is more detrimental than it is helpful because it just means that no survivors can work on that gen for 30 seconds, but regardless, it's still an extremely cool effect. Number 4, any means necessary. Now, before this perk came out, people always asked for some way to rebuild pallets, whether that be with a new item like a wrench or some perk or something, and Behavior finally came out with any means necessary, which allows survivors to pick up downed pallets. There's 2 reasons I have it on this list. One is the fact that it's the only thing that survivors can do to reset pallets. In fact, it was the only thing that anyone could do to reset pallets until Vecna came out. And 2, I find it to be the most balanced and realistic way that they could have implemented this mechanic into the game. Unfortunately, like many perks on this list, it's not actually that powerful, but it still has a very cool effect that no other perk has. And continuing on the trend with pallets, our next perk is Power Struggle. This perk lets you throw pallets with your mind. It's insane. Basically how it works is if you're ever picked up by the killer and you reach 15% wiggling progression, you can throw any pallet that the killer walks through, instantly getting off their shoulders. Now, obviously, I'm sure most of you know about the Power Struggle flip-flop build, especially because I bring it up in almost every video. But this perk just in general, even alone, is so unique. There's never been a perk where you can physically do something on the killer's shoulders, and that is the main reason it is on this list. It's one of the most unique second chance perks in this game. And number 6, like I alluded in the intro, this is Mirrored Illusion. It actually makes me so sad that this perk is not good because it is so freaking awesome. Like, it's so awesome. After you repair generators for a total of 20%, you can press the active ability button next to a chest and exit gate, a generator, or a totem to spawn a clone of you that lasts for a full minute. Now, unfortunately, this perk is very obvious when you use it, even in the killer's POV. First of all, it doesn't make any of the animations or sounds of the actual action itself. So for example, if you put your illusion on an exit gate, it won't make any of the exit gate sounds. And it has this kind of like glowing / shimmering effect that the killer can see from miles away. This perk is already really cool. The fact that you can create a clone of yourself is a very, very unique thing that's never been done before in DBD, but it would be so much more interesting if the perk A had animations and B made sounds of whatever the clone was doing. I also think that the glow and shimmer effect should be a lot less drastic until you get closer to the illusion, kind of like how Wraith works, or you could do a mix of some of those buffs. Like for example, don't have the animations, but have the sounds and get rid of the shimmer. So people with really keen eyes will tell that it's a clone, down, but people who aren't really paying that much attention won't be able to. Regardless, it's still a very unique effect, and I'm surprised that they spent this much work on a single perk. The next perk on this list is going to everyone's favorite gambling perk, Dramaturgy. Dramaturgy is one of those perks that has so many different effects that it's kind of hard to remember. When you're healthy and sprinting, you can press the active ability button to gain a 25% haste for 2 seconds, and then you get a random effect that's either good or bad. There's 2 good effects, which is either you extend your haste by another 2 seconds, or you receive a random item of rare rarity with a random selection of add-ons and automatically drop your previously held item. But you could also get one of 2 bad effects, which is either becoming exposed for 12 seconds or screaming but without notifying the killer. And then this perk makes you exhausted for 40 seconds. The reason I have this perk on this list is because it's the first perk that does this like kind of gambling thing in the game. The fact that you can get either a good effect or a bad effect from one perk is extremely interesting, and I hope they continue to do this for other perks because I absolutely love risk reward mechanics, especially in a game like this. It makes it so that every game doesn't feel the same and gives more character to these perks. Speaking of perks with a lot of character, the next perk on this list is Autodidact. What a phenomenal and extremely fun perk. If you don't know what this perk makes it so that every time you're healing somebody without a med kit and you hit a skill check, you gain a token up to 5 tokens, and every token gives you plus 15% extra progression for hitting one of those skill checks. But you start off with minus 15 progression. So the first ever time you hit a skill check, your progression will actually decrease by 15%, but the next time you hit a skill check, nothing will happen because it, plus 15 makes it 0. And then the next time you hit a skill check, you'll immediately go up 15% on your progression bar, and then 30%, and then 45%, and then 60% at its maximum of 5 tokens. So you could start healing somebody, hit a skill check, and then almost be done. It is so fun. Obviously, you're not going to get to 5 tokens that often unless you're really going out of your way to heal people, and it's kind of hard to pair it with healing perks because technically you want to spend more time healing at the beginning of the match so that you get more skill checks. But regardless, if you've ever used this perk, it is so satisfying once you get up to those higher token counts. Speaking of satisfying, the next perk we have on our list is Bite the Bullet. What a great design of a perk. This makes it so that if you're healing yourself or you're healing another survivor, it suppresses all sounds related to healing and grunts of pain. So you could be right next to the killer literally healing and they won't even know if they can't see you. This is such a creative perk that I never really expected to become a thing, but it allows you to go for such unique and risky plays purely because this perk exists. You can create entire builds around this one single perk, and it creates this entirely new play style. One of the most fun builds to do is the Overcome Bite the Bullet Lucky Break build, which makes you have a longer speed boost after getting hit by the killer while also not leaving any scratch marks or pools of blood, and then you can just go around the corner and start healing, and the killer will literally have zero idea where you went unless you're on just like a completely open outdoor map. So now imagine that build on something like Larry's or some indoor map like Midwich. It's crazy. Such a unique perk that opens new avenues for builds and playstyles. The next perk on this list is going to Spine Chill, but I'm talking about the original Spine Chill and not the terrible current one that's completely useless nowadays. The reason I have this on this list is because the name of the perk and the actual effect of the perk is just so intertwined. It's just intertwined in such a creative and unique way in terms of gameplay mechanics that it was just very well done. The old version of this perk made it so that the perk icon lit up every time the killer was looking in your general direction as long as they were close enough to you. And then this gave you a 6% action speed boost to pretty much all actions in the game, even vaulting. I just think this was such a cool design for a perk. It's so hard to explain why I think this perk is cool, but it's just like the fact that your character is getting a spine chill because they kind of sense that you're coming, if that makes sense. I mean, obviously every perk's name has some relevance to its effect, but this one just feels more unique, I guess. And speaking of perk names, the next perk I have on this list is purely for just the aura it has, and that is Blood Pact. First of all, fire name, Blood Pact, like that's sick. And second of all, the actual effect is essentially creating a blood pact with another survivor. Unfortunately, this perk is awful, but it's still such a cool idea when it came out at the time to essentially create a blood pact with another survivor, and you have to stay with them to get the effect of this perk. It was just a very unique way to implement a perk at the time, and it also has one of the coolest perk icons in the game. The next perk on this list is going to Head On. It is just unbelievably creative for an exhaustion perk. Like, this was such a great idea to make lockers actually a little bit more useful, and it adds so much replay value and fun text and stuff that you can do. I think this is one of the most successful perks that they ever brought to the game. It's not necessarily that strong, but it's so fun that it's just one of the most commonly used exhaustion perks when you're just trying to have a good time. Plus, they had to make entirely new animations and stuff for this perk, and the fact that so much effort went into one single perk, like, you just have to applaud behavior for doing that. And it's clear that they did this to purely have a fun perk in the game game rather than intending on it to be strong, which in my opinion is a better philosophy. And they followed through with this philosophy years later with Nicolas Cage and his perks, including the next perk on our list, Plot Twist. This is risk reward at its finest. You can down yourself while injured and become completely silent, and if you're able to fully recover yourself from the dying state, you become fully healed and you gain a 50% haste for 4 seconds. This is such a fun perk because it has the perfect amount of risk reward to it, because if you're able to pull this off, especially mid chase, it is the most exhilarating thing ever. If you've ever done this, you know what I'm talking about. Being able to lose the killer and make them have no idea where you went when you're just like crawling in a bush somewhere, it is absolutely hilarious. One of the only problems with this perk is it's pretty map dependent, to be honest, because a lot of times if you're in chase, there's not really that many good hiding spots, unless you're on a map like Dead Dog, for example, that has all those dark bushes. But the other issue is that the killer can see you go down on their HUD, which kind of shows them that you plot twisted, so they'll start looking for you. I kind of wish this perk delayed the HUD change on the killer's HUD until you hit like the halfway point, because then I think it would allow you to do the more risky plays rather than using it for an actual practical use outside of chase. So I think that would make it a lot more fun. But regardless, being able to down yourself as the survivor is such a unique effect, and never in a million years would I have expected this perk to come to reality. Now, the next perk on this list is unfortunately one of those perks that was made purely as a band-aid fix to fix a core issue of the game, but it's still such an awesome idea, and I wish that it was actually useful, and this is potential energy. The basics of this perk is that you can activate it while working on a gen, and any of the gen progress that you would have made goes into this perk instead. And then if you go to another generator, you can press a button to immediately apply this perk to that gen, which takes a majority of the progression that you made while using this perk and puts it into the progression of this new gen. So obviously this perk was made to kind of band-aid fix the 3-gen problem we were having at the time, but it's still a really unique perk that they came up with to fix that issue. Being able to basically transfer progression from one gen to another is something we've never seen before, and I just wish that this perk was a little bit more practical, because it's an interesting idea to spend more time working on a safer gen to fill up this perk, but then going to a really dangerous gen and finishing that quicker. Such an interesting perk, but I just wish it was buffed just a slight bit. And last but not least, the newest perk on our list. This is Shoulder the Burden. Again, another band-aid fix perk, but what a unique idea. Being able to transfer hook stages is something I only expected from like YouTube videos of perk ideas. Never would I have expected it to actually become a perk in the game, and it is finally an extremely unique perk that's very good. This perk single-handedly changes how games are played, and over time it's going to become one of those perks that killers just have to play around like DS and Unbreakable because of how practical it is. Plus, of course, I have to give it extra credit for having such a phenomenal perk icon design. But yeah, if you made it this far, drop a like and subscribe if you're new, and let me know what you think is the coolest survivor perk in DBD history. If you like this video, you'll probably like this one where I talk about the 20 most broken perk combos in DBD history, so come check it out and see if you agree.